Hello there, this is Yana and welcome back to another Hero Arts video. I don't know about you, but I'm longing for spring. The long, gloomy winter days have been here for far too long, and I cannot help but reach for bright, vibrant colors and some floral stamps to make my cards these days. You're watching the color layering series, and in this episode, we're taking a closer look at the color layering Poppies stamp set from Hero Arts. When we think of poppies, we all imagine beautiful red flowers. But poppies come in all sorts of colors, not necessarily red. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can use other ink pad colors from Hero Arts to stamp poppies in yellow, pink, and peach, and maybe some other colors too. As with every color layering stamp set from Hero Arts, if you look on the back of the packaging, you'll see the layering instructions and some project ideas to help you jumpstart your creativity. The poppy is a little bit tricky to align, but still doable. Like with many other layering sets, you do need to use several ink pad colors to stamp one image, usually a light, medium, and dark shade. And here we're also using black ink to stamp the centers. I've already started stamping a few flowers to help me figure out the alignment, and you can see I actually messed up one of the images along the way. That's okay, it's all about the learning process. I picked a few yellow ink pad colors. I have soft yellow for the base most solid layer, butterbar for the detail layer, and then also soft apricot for the top shadow layer. With this particular flower, I've discovered that it's much easier to start by stamping the middle layer first and align the other two layers over it. So if you think about this, the solid layer being number 1, the detail layer being number 2, and the top layer being number 3, you're not going to stamp them as 1, 2, 3, but instead you would stamp them as 2, 3, 1. Because you'll need to use a fairly light color of ink for the most solid layer, you can see I had it stamped in soft yellow on my panel. It's actually very hard, because it's so very pale, it's very hard to see through once you place a stamp over it. Very hard to see that stamped layer through a stamp set, like through a next layer stamp set, and figure out the alignment over it. So that's why it's much easier to stamp the middle layer first. Let's give it a try. I'm inking up the middle layer with my butterbar ink. It's a nice bright yellow color that stands out on the paper. To align the third detail layer or shadow layer, you'll need to focus on this petal of your image when stamping. There's one petal that is very prominent on this image. If you look for it when stamping the next layer, you'll be able to align that next layer much easier. I'm going to ink up my shadow layer with soft apricot ink. Look for that petal on both the stamped image and my stamp, and then just stamp the second layer. It's not perfect, but close enough. Remember, your color layering images do not always have to be perfect. They don't have to be perfectly aligned to give you good results. The flower will still look great, even though you did not align it perfectly. Now that I have these two layers stamped, I can now come back and stamp my base layer in that lightest soft yellow ink color. This one is fairly easy to align. You just match the overall image shape with a stamped impression and press down. Super easy. And remember to add your flower center and your poppy is done. You can apply this principle when stamping this image in any other color of ink, be it red, pink, yellow, peach, or any other. If you have a stamp positioner tool, such as Misty, you can easily stamp a bunch of flowers. You just need to align the images once and easily mass produce them. Let me show you how. I cut my white cardstock to 2 inches wide strips. And I'm going to stamp my flowers on each of those strips to have a bunch of florals for my cards today. I'm not really sure how many flowers I'll need, so I'm just going to stamp a couple extras, just in case. Again, I'm starting with a medium layer and my medium color of ink to be able to better align that detail layer. Here, I actually double stamp my images to have better and more vibrant ink coverage. I'm going to stamp several of those medium layers before I move on to stamping the other 2 layers of this flower. Now, the benefit of doing this in an assembly line fashion is that this gives your ink time to dry and absorb into the paper. With this kind of ink, the Hero Arts dye or hybrid ink, you will actually get greater contrast between ink colors if you stamp the next layer over the previous layer that had time to dry and absorb into the paper. So if you stamp a middle layer a bunch of times and then move on to stamping the detail layer, by the time you get to the detail layer, your middle layer ink would have had time to dry or almost dry, and you'll get better contrast between your flower layers, and it will just look better in the end. I really hope I'm not confusing you guys and that you are understanding what I'm trying to say. So basically, once you stamp a layer, give it a couple minutes to dry, and then come back and stamp the next layer over it. You can see I've flipped the MISTI tool, and now the door of my MISTI opens to the right. I still have my middle layer attached to the MISTI door, but now I'm going to stamp the top shadow layer using the same MISTI tool. I'm just using the other corner of my MISTI to align the paper and my shadow layer. Do remember to clean that middle layer stamp that you still have on the lid of your MISTI, as you don't want it accidentally stamping over your good flower and messing it up. That was one of my biggest problems as I was stamping these flowers today. Here's a close-up. I've aligned the shadow layer over the middle detail layer. Those petals I identified earlier are aligned. And now I can close the door of my MISTI and keep on stamping this repeatedly on all of my panels to have as many flowers as I like. The hardest part here is to align the layers, but once you have that figured out, and if you have a MISTI, you'll be able to stamp a bunch of flowers in no time. The ink actually will lighten with time as it dries, and you can see the clear difference between the flower that I had just finished and the one that I finished 3 to 5 minutes ago. To stamp the last layer, which is actually the first base layer, I hope I'm not confusing you with all of those layers and names, but to stamp the most solid layer, I am again using my MISTI and just aligning the paper with the edge of my grid pad. So I have all 3 of my flower layers aligned on one MISTI, and I actually could have added the flower center if I wanted, but that one I decided to just stamp using a clear block. So this makes it very convenient to stamp as many flowers as you like, and you can easily go between colors and have a whole array of colorful blooms or other layered images for your projects. Remember, this applies not only to the color layering flowers, but you can use this trick with any of your color layering stamp sets. I've already cleaned my stamps. I did not remove them from the MISTI. I cleaned them right there on the lid using my Ultra Clean sprayer from Hero Arts, and I'm ready to stamp the poppies in other colors. I'm using soft pink, rose madder, and crimson colors this time. I'm going to repeat the exact same steps to stamp several poppies in pink. There are many other ink pad color options that you can use. I went with a dark pink, but you can opt for lighter colors and go with a much lighter pink combination instead. I also used peach colors, and here I went with fresh peach, soft cantaloupe, and pale tomato. I actually did alter this color combination later and skipped using the base most solid layer to preserve a lot more white highlights on my peach flowers. This is another way that you can customize your images. Just skip stamping a layer for a slightly different look. I ended up using just the fresh peach and pale tomato colors. One of the keys to successful assembly line fashion stamping in this case is having your paper cut to the same size. Mine is 2 inches wide, so just make sure that whatever pieces of paper you're using, make sure they are all cut to the same size so that your stamping will always end up in the same place. I've also tried using other ink colors, although I ended up not actually using the stamped flowers. I did save them with my stamp set for the future. I tried stamping purple flowers using orchid and grape juice inks. These ended up being just a tad too dark for my taste. Perhaps if I have opted to use a bit lighter purples, I might have still used these flowers and incorporated them into my today's cards. But I still wanted to show you these other color options in case they inspire you. With the other flower in this stamp set, and you actually have two poppies, like two open blooms in this stamp set. So with the other flower, the alignment and stamping process is basically the same. I start by stamping the middle detail layer in medium color of ink, then align the detail layer over it, stamp it in dark color of ink, and then come back to the base layer and stamp it in the lightest color. Here's a close-up showing what petals or stamp parts to look at when aligning these two layers. So again, you have several petals that make it easier to align the next layer. I stamped the base layer and just need to stamp the flower center to complete this image. Very easy, and my flower is done. There are coordinating dies available for these images, so I used mine to cut all of these flowers as well as the stems out. I didn't mention or I didn't show stamping the stems and like the little flower buds, but I used moss ink to do so, and I actually stamped several to use on my cards. The rest is completely up to you, how you want to use the flowers and build your cards. For my first card, I die-cut letters to spell miss you. I used coordinating dies from the luggage tag alphabet set from Hero Arts and just cut them out from white and black cardstock. I adhered the white letters onto black using glue, and I offset them slightly to have a little bit of shadow show on the card. I like how the letters are white. They would have blended with a white background, but because I have that shadow, they now have a little bit of something to help them stand out. Next, I arranged the flowers that I wanted to use for this card, and I either foam mounted them using foam adhesive squares, or I adhered them directly onto the background using glue. For the background panel for this card, and also for one other card today, I used Hero Arts white wood grain cardstock. It has beautiful wood grain texture and works really well for clean and simple cards. I always use this paper, it's just fantastic. I also used foam adhesive to foam mount the letters to pop them up on my card a little bit. Later, I added a sub-sentiment here that reads, "You are really the best." I ink blended a piece of white paper using rose madder ink to have it match in color to the stamped poppies on my card. And once it was dry, I heat embossed a sentiment in white embossing powder to use on my card. I just felt like the card was lacking without a sub-sentiment, so this is why I decided to add it. It was definitely an afterthought for this project, but I'm glad that I took the extra steps to make it and add it to the card, as it kind of helped it become complete. I also used sequins from the Champagne Sequin Mix and added those here and there on this project. Now, I wasn't quite sure how I would position this sentiment strip, so I ended up cutting it into two pieces to help it fit. Now, it's actually more of a design element here rather than an actual sentiment, I think, but it still looks nice on the finished card. My card number 2 features the same poppies, but on stems this time. There are 2 stem images in this stamp set and a coordinating die that will cut one of them out. For my last card for today, I used one of Hero Arts wood grain envelopes, and I actually cut it to be able to use just the paper as the card front for this card. I did that because I wanted to stamp a sentiment directly on the card background, and had I used a regular Hero Arts wood grain cardstock, it would not have looked this good, as the texture on that paper is actually quite pronounced and it would have interfered with my stamping. The texture on the envelopes, on the other hand, on the wood grain textured envelopes, is not as pronounced. It's much, less textured, I guess. So stamping on it wasn't a problem. I did use my Misty tool to stamp the sentiment, and I did double stamp it for better results, but it ended up looking fine. Of course, you can most definitely use just regular white cardstock, smooth cardstock, but I wanted to have just a hint of texture on this background. As you can see here, I decided that I would make a little bouquet here with the poppies, and I included several stems, and then I foam mounted the flowers over them. I actually did not adhere the stems in place using any kind of adhesive, as I wanted to tie some gold thread around it to make it look like it was actually holding the flowers together. The stems are only held in place with foam adhesive from the flower heads themselves. So here's a closer look at the 3 cards that I have for you today, featuring the color layering poppy stamp set from Hero Arts. I hope this video has given you some stamping ideas to try with your color layering stamp sets from Hero Arts. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.